Over the past 18 months, I've been covering many of the most prominent cars of the Fast and Furious franchise. You would know this because you're all following my channel and subscribed, right?
Do it! Just do it!
Basically, I focused on the main cars, the cars that were used by the main actors, mostly because the background cars are usually nothing more than day rentals, loaned to us by private owners who lived in the areas in which we were filming, or we only saw glimpses of these cars, and so they weren't really interesting enough to talk about. These cars are little more than props or set decoration as far as Universal is concerned. They're just meant to be in the background there and not stand out. And because of this, the picture car department, who is responsible for building the actual movie cars, has very little to do with these cars in the first 3 movies. They just didn't have to touch those cars to modify them, so it was left up to the set decoration people. And so generally speaking, background cars are just handled differently than principal cars or stunt cars. For example, we don't take inventory of the mods or parts on these cars, nor do we get into the backstories of these cars because it's not necessary as part of our job. It just doesn't matter. They are considered nothing more than set decoration like lamps or chairs and so on, and therefore we simply have no time to document these cars because it's just not necessary to do anything more than to park these cars in the background and then send them home after we're done filming. So for the most part, I've avoided talking about these background / extra cars because A, most people want to hear about the main cars, and B, there isn't really any information about these cars to share anyway, and C, these cars only get very little screen time or even a little tiny glimpse in the background. So they're just not interesting to a lot of viewers, most people in fact. And I say this out of experience because for the past several years, I've rarely been asked about any of the background cars at all. But there was one car from Tokyo Drift that was an exception. I've actually been asked about this car a few times, enough to arouse my curiosity, because frankly, I don't even remember the backstory about it, but I did know who had the car, so I reached out to this person. And this car was one of several that came over from Japan and ended up as eye candy in the underground parking lot scene that we see in Tokyo Drift. But just how it got to be in the movie wasn't 100% clear, and the guy that would know all of the stuff about that passed away. That guy was John Weiser. John Weiser was a picture car wrangler on Tokyo Drift. He leaned on his contacts in Japan as he did in Too Fast, Too Furious, and as well as technical advisor Toshi Hayami on Tokyo Drift. They both had connections with tuner companies in Japan, so a rental arrangement was made and the car was shipped over to America. So with its experience now explained, the next question had to be, what happened to the car after the movie? Where did it go? It seemed like it just bloody disappeared, right? We'll find out right after this commercial break. Confession, I hate cleaning my own cars. That's why I love Adams polishes. Whatever you want to clean, polish, or shine, Adams has a specific product just for that, even for matte finishes. Since 2000, Adams Polishes has been offering premium car care products dedicated to the enthusiast. Whether you're a professional detailer or a weekend warrior, their innovative and effective products will enable you to achieve amazing results on your prized possession. Adams, made with pride and passion in the USA. So we're talking about this car, the S15 that we see at the very end of Tokyo Drift. That is for audiences who stayed past the credits. If you did, you got to see Sean Boswell lining up against Dominic Toretto. Toretto and yet another Mopar, yawn, and Sean in this car. Known in the drift world as the Drift Speed Quicksilver S15, this car has a pretty interesting story going back to years before Tokyo Drift was even thought about. In fact, as Pro-Am drifter Matt Priedmore will attest, the car was well known before Tokyo Drift and it was well known long after Tokyo Drift, but not for the same reasons. But back in 2005, it was just one of about 200 extra cars that we had rented to appear as set decoration for the underground parking garage scene in Tokyo Drift, as I just mentioned. A recent commenter noted that there was probably enough history on the car to tell the story, so I tracked down Matt Priedmore, the most recent owner, and we had a nice discussion about the car where we got all the details. Matt had been living in Japan from 2006 to 2010, and along the way he became familiar with the company Drift Speed, right? This car was originally owned by Drift Speed, as I mentioned earlier, but Y Square had a hand in the car as well. At the time, Kwok Lee was competing in the Drift Speed USA series. Matt already knew about this car for years, and so when it became available, he bought it from Kwok in 2011, which was soon after Matt moved back to the United States after living in Hiroshima, Japan. But Matt had no idea that this car was ever used in Tokyo Drift when he bought it. I guess drifters don't watch drifting movies. Maybe that's the reason that movie didn't do so well in the box office. At the time, the original setup looked like this. This is when Drift Speed had the car, and it still had an SR20 DET engine in it, making about 400 horsepower. It ran on an Apex integration Power FC and a Garrett turbo using a Yashio factory bottom mount turbo manifold. It also had a Greddy intake manifold, a Koyo radiator, a Kazam catch can, a Blitz US boost controller, an HKS air filter, an ARC front mount intercooler, an HKS oil cooler, and a Y-square Besiege exhaust. Other interesting bits included a Nismo head gasket, an Agora racing clutch, made it to a Nismo 6-speed transmission, and a Nismo rear differential. Suspension duties were handled by DG5 coilovers, which were made specially by Keiichi Tsuchiya and were sprung with Swift springs, 10K up front, 9K in the rear, with 1.5K helper springs. For a good measure, a set of Swift stabilizer bars were used, and a Kazama Auto adjustable control arm setup was used as well. Wheels were raised Daytona Racing DR505, measuring 18 by 9 in front with the plus 25 offset and 18 by 10 in the rear with the plus 5 offset. Tire sizes were 225/40/18 in the front and 245/40/18 in the back. I have no information on the brakes, but they appear, from what I could see from old pictures, to be the standard spec 4-pot calipers. Exterior mods started with the Bearman Y-Square Besiege D1 GP Spec Pro full body kit. A Teijin Tignor yellow carbon fiber hood was used, along with a Besiege Y-Square carbon fiber GT wing and Besiege Y-Square clear taillights. The car also had Teijin carbon fiber front and rear diffusers. The paint was listed as smoke gray, but others say it was quicksilver, so not sure which color was on the car at which time. But you have to understand that this car went through many changes through many, many years. So before you drop me a comment saying, hey, this part was not on this car at that time or this time or whatever, or whenever you saw it, this car's been running around for 20 years and it's changed hands several times. Things have changed. So that's the best parts list I have. That's the best thing Matt could provide as well. Either way, the car's appearance in the movie was perfect because it was a great representation of Sean Boswell's character arc. Remember? Having beaten DK in the fateful final race, he was done driving poser cars. Remember that Mona Lisa that he had? And so when he lines up in this car, this was actually a legit drift car, not like the cars he drove before it. Unfortunately, the car doesn't get much screen time at all, and that is a darn shame because this car was better in every way over the Mona Lisa S15, which in my view was quite a poser. First off, the Mona Lisa was not a legit drift car, and the paint job was taken right off of 1970s Chevy custom vans. There was nothing JDM about that car at all, except maybe the wheels. There was nothing JDM about the paint job on Mona Lisa, and that didn't sit well with me. It was a stripped out interior. It had nothing going for it. I'm still amazed, frankly, that people elsewhere in the world aren't laughing at the graphics because they were in Japan. Pro drifters in this country didn't take that movie or those cars seriously as well. This car was more representative of the JDM drift missiles of that era, but because it wasn't painted a bright color, it would not end up having a starring role in the movie, which is tragic because this was the best S15 they've ever used in any of those movies. So before you ask who would have won the race between Sean and Dom, I'm going to go ahead and answer that right here. With a 400-pound weight advantage and being almost 3 feet shorter, the S15 would have wiped the floor with Dom. Maybe that's why they didn't show the whole race, right? Or maybe not. After all, these movies are not documentaries. Which car wins any given race within these movies is already written into the script, and the outcome is not based on reality, physics, or anything resembling facts. It's always pure fiction. Sometimes the accuracy is coincidental, but usually not. The outcome is always predetermined, so it's pointless to argue about it. But if the specs weren't true in the movie, the S15 would have won. So what happened after the movie? The car went back to drifting, and around 2011, Matt Priedmore acquired the car and started using the car for its intended purpose again, drifting. And he did that for several years. And over the next 5 or 6 years, the car appeared at a wide range of drifting events in the United States. Eventually, Matt says, it got a 2JZ swap, and Matt drove the things off that thing for several seasons in that configuration. But as Matt tells it, around 2018, the economics of drifting stopped making sense for Pro-Am drivers like Matt, so he hung up his helmet and ended up selling the car just not long ago. Citing confusing judging, small payouts, poor tracks that were too small, and sponsor dollars shifting to other forms of advertising, it just didn't make sense for drivers like Matt. Many others have said the same thing, but yet drifting continues on, but it gets difficult without sponsorship dollars. So where is the car now today as in 2021? A company called Buy Now Japan, based out of Japan, has bought the car, and it is currently in Georgia being rebuilt with the intent of using the car in the Formula Drift Series Pro 1 class in 2022. So it's still around. Now, it probably won't look anything like it did in Tokyo Drift when we see it again. However, the car lives on, and that makes me happy. So, and of course, it would be nice to have the car restored to its movie condition someday. But unlike some of the movie cars from the early movies, this car was built for go and not for show. So let it do its thing, right? That's gonna be it for this episode. Everybody, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.